I talk a lot on this channel about getting margin with your cash flow, but once you have margin, what do you do with it? What's the next step? We're going to talk about it today on this episode of Financial Story Hour, where we dive into relatable financial stories to empower you to change your own. And if you could for me, I would really appreciate it if you would be like my dad, who is the first to hit the like button every week. Love you, Dad. Be like my dad and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. And with that said, let's get into it. If I asked you if you had a plan for your next dollar, if you had a plan for your money, chances are you would probably either have no idea, like, no, I'm just trying to survive. So there's no plan, right? That's something that a lot of us are currently subscribing to, whether we like it or not. But if you do have a plan or know of a plan, a lot of you guys will probably say, well, the Ramsey baby steps. Dave Ramsey, been around forever. He's a big name, and his baby steps have helped a ton of people get out of debt and build their financial foundation. And I respect him for that. And there's another duo out there that I love and respect a ton, and that they are Brian Preston and Bo Hansen. They are the Money Guys. They have a YouTube channel called The Money Guys Show, and they are financial advisors by trade. They have a company called Abound Wealth, which by all accounts is very successful, and they are just really great down-to-earth guys. They have also developed a system. So you have the Ramsey baby steps, but you also have over here the financial order of operations, or more lovingly referred to by fans of theirs, the FOO. So think of it like PEMDAS. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. For math, they have an order of operations for your financial life. And both of these plans, of course, Dave Ramsey's been around forever. The Money Guys have also been around forever, truthfully, but they're really gaining traction now. And I'm really glad that they are, that their message is getting out there. And they are very similar in a lot of ways. And if you watch their content, you're going to see that they have a mutual respect for each other and their respective businesses. And so I want to carry on that tradition. I know there's a lot of people that will, try to get a lot of clicks on YouTube by dragging Dave Ramsey through the mud or something, or trying to, get him on something. That's not me. I'm not here to do that. I'm not here to take away from a legacy that has helped a lot of people. At the same time, though, I do love the alternate option that is the Money Guys and the financial order operations. As we're going to break down today, I want to talk about both of these systems, where they're similar, where they're different, and which one should you follow? Which one should you choose, quote unquote? So let's dive right in and talk about Ramsey baby step number 1. And that is save up $1,000 for a starter emergency fund. So if you're starting off with the Ramsey plan, the very first thing you are doing is, as fast as you can, gazelle intense is how he words it, you're going to be saving that first $1,000. And whether that means working overtime, whether that means selling some things that you have in your house, you are getting to that $1,000 as fast as you can. And they call it a starter emergency fund because obviously it's not a full emergency fund. Now we're going to go into emergency funds here in just a little bit, but this is one of the first places right off the bat where Dave Ramsey and his baby steps do get a little bit of flack. A lot of people talk about with inflation, it just doesn't seem like $1,000 is necessarily enough before moving on to step 2. It seems like maybe in today's day and age, most of our, even minor emergencies, a car repair or something, it could very quickly absorb that $1,000. And so a lot of people talk about, bumping that up a little bit. And I think that's a fair point, and we'll discuss that more in a second. I just want to acknowledge that their response to this argument is that the $1,000 is not supposed to be quote unquote enough. It's not a fully funded emergency fund. It is just something to take care of those very minor ankle biter things that might come up while you're on your debt payoff journey. And having so little of an emergency fund is actually supposed to be a little bit of a motivation to work quickly through the steps. So they do have a response to that. Again, I have thoughts. I'll share them after we talk about the Money Guys step 1. All right, so let's jump over to the financial order of operations. And that step 1 is similar, but more nuanced. It is highest deductible covered. So when we talk about deductibles, obviously we're talking about your insurance coverages. So you're going to find out which is your highest deductible, whether that be your health insurance, maybe your auto, or whatever the case may be. You're going to find your highest deductible, and that is what you're going to set your sights on for your starter emergency fund. Now, obviously, the pros of this is that it's tied to something tangible that kind of makes sense. So you're not just picking an arbitrary number. It's actually tied to something that makes sense in terms of like, hey, if something catastrophic happens, you're able to pay the deductible so that insurance can theoretically take the rest. So again, this also is not supposed to be a fully funded emergency situation. Most of the time, this will probably result in you having a bigger starter emergency fund than the $1,000. The cons, in my opinion, are that, if I ask the random person on the street, what's your highest deductible? I mean, I don't know how many people would know the answer to that. It is something you have to go and research and dig through, documents or look through apps on your phone. And maybe it shouldn't be hard to find, but I know that being realistic, it would be hard to find. Whereas if I say, hey, how much is $1,000? You'd be like, $1,000. So there is something very clean and crisp with the Dave Ramsey $1,000. There is something that to the more logical mind, the more systematic mind, makes a lot more sense with the financial order of operations. For me, it's hard. I see the pros and cons of both. And so, obviously I'm going to go through both aspects of these steps with my clients when I'm working with them. And probably what I would be doing is settling on something that is a solid number, right? Especially if they're somebody on the younger side that don't have all the insurances in place, maybe, or they just don't know and they're intimidated to look. Even though that does make a lot of sense, I think that having a number is also very helpful. And of course, that is a number, but just settling on a number that feels right. And so that number, if I'm talking through this with a client, is probably going to be more than $1,000. Now let's check out Ramsey baby step number 2. This is pay off all debt except for your house using the debt snowball method. Now there's a few things to this. First of all, they emphasize paying off all debt except for your house. So student loans, credit cards, auto loans, no matter what kind of debt it is, regardless of interest rate, you're paying it all off and you are using the debt snowball method. Now we're going to talk about different methods later. The debt snowball method is where you pay off the smallest balance first, and then when that balance is paid off, you roll that payment into paying off the next debt, and that creates the snowball effect, right? Where your margin that you're paying on these debts increases. And they're very particular about this because they really emphasize the the benefits of the quick wins. So obviously, if you're paying off your smallest balance first, hopefully that's coming pretty quick. You realize, hey, that felt really good to pay that off. Let's keep going, and that makes the journey easier. This does not take into account interest rates, which we'll go into more later. But this is another area where Dave Ramsey, again, just for the sheer fact that he's been around forever, gets a lot of flack. And again, this is just his philosophy. Hopefully you'll develop your own after watching this video. Now let's jump back over to the financial order of operations. I'm just going to call it the FOO from now on because that's a mouthful. So back over to the FOO. This is where immediately on step 2, there's a real divergence in the two methods. And the Money Guys step 2 is actually investing in your employer-sponsored plan, your 401k or 403b, whatever it may be, up to the match. So with the FOO step 2, we haven't even got to paying off any debt yet. We're first taking advantage of your employer match if you have one. If you don't, this doesn't apply to you. But let's say you work at a company and they have a 5% match. They'll match your contributions up to 5%. So in other words, you put in 5% of your pay and they will match that. Essentially, you are investing 10% of your money. Now, the reason that the Money Guys put this in step 2 is because free money is such a big deal, especially in the investing world. Investing, we'll talk about the power of investing in this video and in other videos. But, the hope when you're investing in the stock market is you get, 8 to 10 to maybe 12% rate of return. And of course, a lot of our debts, especially think about credit card debt. Credit card debt right now could be 25%. That's a huge interest rate for debt. And there's no way, most of the time, there's no way you're going to beat that 25% just investing in the market, especially if you're just investing wisely for the long term. However, if you take advantage of your employer match, that's actually, if it's a dollar for dollar match, it's actually 100% rate of return. If it's a 50 cents to the dollar match, that's a 50% rate of return automatically when you invest up to that match. And so the Money Guys see that, hey, you need to take advantage of this because that is going to be powerful money, and it still beats a 25% credit card rate. And it for sure beats a 7% car loan or a 4% student loan. I'm just throwing random numbers out there. There's not really many debts that are going to beat that 100%, that 50% rate of return. So if you're following the FOO, then you're going to save up to your highest deductible, whatever that number may be. And then you're going to start taking advantage of your employer match. Again, up to whatever that match is. If it's 3%, you're only investing 3%. If it's 5%, you're investing 5%. Some people have crazy matches. Again, it's hard to walk away from free money. Maybe you can tell kind of where I land on this. Again, I'm going to be talking through this with clients, and I will be helping them come to their own philosophy when it comes to this. Now, let's move on to Ramsey Baby step number 3. Now, step 3 of the Ramsey Baby steps is save 3 to 6 months of living expenses as your fully funded emergency fund. Now, notice we're on step 3, and we still have not talked about investing on the Ramsey plan. And this is because they are proponents of focusing on one thing at a time. They don't see the benefit in splitting your focus between, invest a little bit here and then you're paying the rest off over here. They say it's better to hunker down because they say that most people who diligently work their plan are done paying off their debt in 2 to 3 years tops. And in their eyes, it's more valuable to stay focused than to take advantage of that match for that short amount of time. And I say short kind of with air quotes. Again, it kind of depends on your philosophy. I think they have a very valid point of view. But like I said, we are not talking about investing yet. We're going straight from paying off all of your debt except for your house to saving up an emergency fund. Now, that 3 to 6 months is something that you'll hear most financial people talk about. And I just want to touch on some of the nuances here for a second. It's very similar to the money guys. 3 to 6 months is obviously, it's a range, and there's a couple of factors that you should consider when you are trying to figure out what's right for you. Things like, are you married? Do you have a dual income situation? Obviously, if you're the sole breadwinner for your family and you have little ones that are depending on you, you want to beef your emergency fund. On the other hand, if you have 2 people working, making relatively the same income, that lends itself to, if you want, closer to a 3-month. Also, the type of job you have. Do you have a job that's very easily replaced? Can you go out and get a job very quickly? Or are you in some kind of specialized field that takes a long time to actually find a new position that could be comparable to what you have? Are you making such an inflated income that if you lost that job, it would be very hard to replace and maintain your lifestyle? That again pushes you out towards the 6 months or beyond. So there's a couple of factors. That's why they give a range. Again, if you're my client, we're going to talk through what's right for you in this situation. Ramsey baby step number 3 is saving up your fully funded emergency fund. Now let's jump over to the financial order of operations and their step number 3. Now we're starting to talk about paying off some debt in the FOO. And so step 3 is paying off high interest debt. Now, notice that I said high interest debt, not all debt except for your house. So the Money Guys system, the financial order of operations, allows wiggle room for you to determine what is best for you in terms of if there's an arbitrage situation. So, for instance, right now interest rates are really high, but maybe you got a student loan when rates were really, really low, and maybe you are a 20-something or maybe just cracking into 30s, and you have a student loan with like a 3 or 4% interest rate. Well, if you compare the power of compound interest in your favor in, say, the stock market, if you were investing, versus saving that 3 to 4% by paying down that debt, you might decide and determine that actually it's worth just paying the minimum on that student loan and investing the rest, what you would have used to pay down that debt, in the stock market. And that's key, because obviously if you don't pay down your debt, but you just go spend and inflate your lifestyle with that extra money, that is not going to benefit you at all. If you are trying to be a maximizer, and the financial order of operations certainly gears itself towards maximizing your financial life, then you might decide to just pay the minimum and keep that debt around so that you can invest in the market instead. Neither at this point advocates paying off your house in their steps that we've gotten to so far. So obviously, if you have a really low mortgage rate, you're just still paying that. So they kind of have a formula. I'm not going to go too much into it. Usually it's like, 6%. If you're in your 20s, 6% is kind of where you want to draw that line of what's high interest. If you're in your 30s, 5%, and beyond that, you really get down to really wanting to pay off the debt. So if you're younger, especially, take advantage of this. But you're paying off that high interest debt. So again, on the side, you are taking advantage of the employer match, and with the leftover money you are paying down your debts. And they don't specify a method, but again, they're maximizers, so they, mathematically prefer what's called the debt avalanche method. And so remember, the snowball is where you pay off the lowest balance regardless of interest rate. The debt avalanche is actually paying off the highest interest rate first. All right, now, not until Ramsey baby step number 4 are we going to dive into investing. And so remember, for the Ramsey plan, you're starting out saving $1,000. You are paying off all of your consumer debt except your house. And you are saving 3 to 6 months in a fully funded emergency fund before you touch investing. And they advise in step 4, getting to a place where you're investing 15% of your income for retirement. Now, they don't specify what vehicles, they don't specify, pre-tax, after-tax. Of course, they do in their content. They have lots to say about the various kinds of accounts, but as far as just their steps go, it's just investing 15%. Good thing to note here, in the Ramsey plan, if you're going strictly by their rules, they don't count the employer match in that. So if you have an employer who matches 5% in your 401k, you're going to put in 15%, and then the employer is going to put in that 5%, making it 20%. So you are doing, regardless of what your employer is doing, you are doing 15%. And again, great thing about the Ramsey plan is that's very clear cut. It's very understandable, and they don't bother playing with a lot of nuance. Now, we are going to jump back over to the financial order of operations, and there, step number 4 is actually where they include saving up their true emergency fund. And so again, they talk a lot about 3 to 6 months. They do have room in there for if you're about to retire, for instance. They talk a lot about saving up a year to a year and a half worth of expenses, and that's for other reasons that involve writing out market downfalls and things like that. But for the most part, we're talking about 3 to 6 months living expenses. So that is their step 4, financial order of operations. Step 4 is fully funding your emergency fund. Now, this video is getting really long, and so I do think I'm going to have to break it up, and that works out just fine because we've talked a lot about the very practical, very foundational first steps for both of these plans. And beyond this, it gets a little even more nuanced, and I have a lot of things to say about that. But I do want to wrap this up by talking about the Money Guys' general philosophy of investing. Whereas Dave Ramsey talks about 15%, the Money Guys talk about 25%. Now, if you aren't in the space and you're just trying to wrap your head around actually putting money aside for the future, and you hear 25%, that's really intimidating. And they get that number from, a lot of their clients and people that come to them or watch their content are right in that range where 25% will allow a person to replace their income in retirement. Now, obviously, and this is a nuance that I can explore with my clients that they can't really explore in their their YouTube channels or what have you. But obviously, if you're on the younger side, if you're 21, you have a huge advantage when it comes to time and compound interest. And you don't, again, you have to assess your values. You have to assess what's best for you and what your philosophy is. But you don't necessarily have to invest 25% to have a really good retirement. On the other hand, if you are older, if you don't get this until you are in your 40s, as a lot of people don't, 40s or 50s, and you are heading towards retirement, 25% is still intimidating. But if you were to only invest 15%, you might fall short of where you really want to be. And so it's a really good standard to push towards. And I really understand why the Money Guys are big proponents of 25%. I just think there's room for nuance there. And they have lots of cool tools to help you realize how impactful your dollars are for the future, depending on your age and how much time they have to grow. So as you can see, these first couple of steps for both plans are really about security. They're about tackling debts and encumbrances to your cash flow so that you can have margin to then invest. And so that is going to be what we're going to talk about a lot next week. But just setting this foundation is super important. Now, as I'm comparing and contrasting these two plans, remember that the most dangerous thing you can do with your financial plan is not have one. Really, you're going to be okay whichever of these plans you follow. And there might be one that might be slightly better for you, but really, neither of them is going to lead you down into a ditch, more than likely, if you're actually following through and not doing it halfway. So, with that said, if you need help understanding these steps, understanding the whys behind them, and how it impacts you, I would love to sit down with you, to talk with you over the phone, and be able to walk you through what is it for you based on your age, based on your values, and based on your goals. What is the best way? Because it might be a hybrid. It might be a little bit of both. And it's super important that you understand the steps themselves so that you can customize them, because you understand what the goal is behind them. I don't want my clients to just rattle off a program or set steps. I want my clients to be able to articulate why they are following the steps that they are, whether they come from Dave Ramsey or the Money Guys or something we come up with together. You should be able to understand why you're doing what you're doing with your finances. And if you need help with that, I would love to work with you. Go to newstoryfinancial.com and schedule a call that we can just hop on, talk for 15 minutes and discuss if coaching is right for you, or if there are resources that I can get to you. I'm going to link to videos where the Ramsey Solutions gang and the Money Guys talk about their own systems, so that if you want to hear about it from them and not just me, you can do that independently. But you can schedule a call, you can message me, and we'll get in touch about seeing how I can help you, because that's what we want to do. We want to help remind you that you can change your financial story. And so with that said, I'll see you guys in the next video.